I've been getting into internal family systems recently. It's a parts-based approach that, yeah, treats us as more complicated than just having a single thing that we want to do, and then for some reason we don't do it, and we get confused about, well, I want to do it, but why didn't I do it? And if we model ourselves as being more complex than that, of having different parts of us that want different things and need different things, and maybe even believe different things, that with this understanding and accepting this kind of complexity and having compassion towards those different parts of ourselves, we can make a lot more progress, I think, in resolving those inner conflicts and in working towards our goals or healing our traumas or whatever it is. And I've I've found a few different models that have related approaches, but IFS in particular I find to be really valuable, very structured, and it gives a really helpful guide and gives you tools that you can go away and use for yourself, as Elliot was saying in the discussion before we hit record. So yeah, Elliot has been working with this for quite a while, put a lot of effort into understanding and practicing it. So I'm happy to hand it over to Elliot. Elliot is also a coach, works with people around a lot of stuff, often I think with a very sort of body-based and internally based approach, which is aiming to get to the heart, the resolution of what's going on internally. So happy to hand it over to Elliot, and I look forward to learning more myself.
Great, thank you. Yeah, there's that's an interesting place to start. There's a split between exterior and interior, where exterior might be like, oh, why didn't I exercise today? And interior would be like, oh, I didn't feel like it, or something was going on inside me that then affects my exterior, or how I relate to the exterior, how I get done what I plan to get done in the exterior world. And there's obviously a lot going on with that relationship. Um, there's a whole cluster of methods that go for the exterior, like the behavioral, and then there's a whole bunch of methods that go for the interior. So internal family systems, kind of right there in the name, it goes for that interior space. So as you were saying, it views the name came from actually external families, where if you do a type of therapy with a whole family, you'd invite them into the room and get them to like sort out their differences and negotiate. And then one of the main proponents of the modern branch of internal family systems was like, oh, I can do this inside one person, not just in a room full of people. And so he did, and he started working at the as if inside one person's head is a whole family of people, characters, creatures that are all trying to kind of get along and have obviously different strategies. And I mean, the classic, so this is the basic premise. The basic premise is we're made up of parts. And there's a side path here of like, how real are the parts and how permanent are they? Generally, I don't worry too much about that. For some people, they seem to, once they've worked out they have parts, be able to check in every day. For other people, they just they do the therapy and then they walk out of the therapy and the parts are gone. So it's up to the person who is building and exploring this method as to how serious the parts are, and if there is something maybe alarming, if you find like a scary part or something. What do I do with the fact that some part of me is kind of scary? Well, we don't have to continue them outside of the therapy. We can just sort of leave them behind. But the basic premise is we're made up of parts. And a classic example of this is I kind of want to go for a run and exercise, but I also kind of want to like sit on the couch the whole time. And obviously, one way of thinking of this is there's actually two of me in here. There's the one that is very motivated to go over there, and there is the one that is motivated to stay here. And in that sense, I have different motivations, and what I need to do is get those different parts of me to talk to each other, and so that we agree on where we're going to go. And obviously, sometimes what happens with people is that they get a part to sort of be the boss of their system. So I was talking to someone once, and they called it the librarian part. And to them, they were like, "Oh, I'm just an organized person, and I'm very, very strict and structured and organized." And then when we examined this part and some other parts, we realized there's also some really creative parts in there. And the librarian was just sort of tricking the rest of the system that it was all in the plan that we were going to be very organized. Whereas that's sort of like the tendency of planning parts is to be more organized than creative parts. And then the person was like, "Oh, actually, I'd like to be more creative for the next phase of my life." Opened up some of those creative parts, some of those more uh, imaginary parts, and got to have a lot more fun having a lifestyle that wasn't as trapped and structured as they were finding their librarian parts. So we get all sorts of interesting things happening with parts. Um, yeah, um, there's a couple of main models for how to do internal family systems. There's a guy by the name of Richard Schwartz, and his main model is you find parts, and we'll get to that. You find parts and you put them in a room, and your imaginary room, and you get them in the room and you get them to talk to each other. You sit outside the room and you get them to talk to each other, and often what will happen is you'll find yourself in the room arguing with them, and then again you need to step outside of the room and put the parts back in the room so that you can observe from a neutral, compassionate, calm distance while they do the talking and negotiate how they're going to act towards each other. That's an interesting model. It's got some merit in terms of being very democratic. There's a very different model by a guy named Jay Early, and he runs a more linear process, and he divides parts into a few main categories, and then has a very step-by-step process for working with them. So he divides, this is in generally in internal family systems, parts that are protective. So their job is to protect the system and therefore take actions in the world or cause a strong emotion. Like a part may get very angry in protecting ourselves, or it may rush to the fridge and eat the ice cream so that we can forget about all our worries. And these are two examples of strategies that a part may take in making actions in the world to protect us or to protect us from its own perspective. We need protective in that way. The other type of part is called an exile, like a smaller, younger, usually inner child part, not always younger, but usually come from like our childhood, is the part that needs protecting. And they are not the same as protectors in that they don't really take actions in the world, but they're usually burdened down with some pain or frustration or upsetness, like a very sad part. And because this part is very sad, uh, every time I approach a similar sadness in my life, a protector part steps in and feeds me lots of ice cream. Great, great process. But what I need to do is find my protector part, work out why the heck it's doing that, maybe, and then get its permission to go visit my exile. And this is the very linear process. Visit this young sad part, resolve the sad thing, and there's a couple of methods to doing that, and then go back and check with the protector. Maybe take the young exile part, take it to a better place in the world. Like it seems like parts of us sort of live in repeated memories. So that time my dad yelled at me when I was 3, there's a part sort of still stuck in that memory that I will need to unburden from the process, and like, oh, you don't have to be constantly traumatized. You can, go relax on the beach or something. And then go back to the protector and be like, hey, we don't actually need the ice cream because it's just sadness. It's not too bad. And then we end up with the system, an internal system that is less constrained by these parts and their habits that they've set up. So that's a much more linear way. It doesn't really put all the parts in the room and get them to talk to each other. It's just a slightly different approach. As I was saying earlier, different people's minds seem to be organized differently. You can leave the parts intact and sort of like leave therapy and still carry your little sad child with you everywhere you go, or you can just leave it in the therapy room sort of thing. The other interesting thing is, and this is something that I really love, is the question of do we discover the parts or do we create them in order to work with them? And that's this really big question mark. Like, did I, when I was 3, did I invent the parts? And then therefore my mind is structured in parts that I never noticed because I've never done parts work. And now that I'm 30, I'm like reviewing what I set up when I was a 3-year-old. Or am I like, why do I act like this as a 30-year-old? Why do I act like this? And then I go and I invent parts on the fly as I'm working with them. And really, it doesn't matter. The internal family systems model works either way. I find it kind of cool and fascinating that it can work either way, but it just like, it works. These are interesting questions, but not doing the therapy and getting the heart to solving the problems. So there's a, moving forward from here. Often we find ourselves with a particular problem. So it may be like a procrastination problem. It may be like I want to exercise, but I'm lazy problem. And we're sort of like stuck in the problem, which means that if you look at the process of internal family systems, there's a couple of steps through which, if we have those steps on automatic, we actually, if we have all of these steps right, we don't need internal family systems. We actually don't have problems. All of our problems just naturally solve themselves. But as a matter of fact, we do have problems. And so we're probably stuck in one of a couple of very common methods. So for example, one of them is the beginner's mind, where chances are we've done this. I thought I dealt with this problem already. Why is it coming up again? And immediately I'm like, oh, I don't need to listen to this problem. I don't really have a problem. I'm in denial a bit. Immediately I am like trying not to think too hard about the problem. Immediately I'm like, how do I just get rid of it? And the beginner's mind is a concept to come along, start afresh. Like, if this problem is still in my life, then in fact, it might be a new problem. It might be a new iteration of the same problem. Whatever I tried in the past doesn't seem to have stuck for whatever reason. So if I'm approaching this problem as if I've tried everything on this one, then I've sort of got the wrong attitude for like diving in here. And there are some pitfalls where if I forget to restart with the beginner's mind, then I might not be able to solve the problem because I keep going, not this again. So one of the missing pieces that I would name is the beginner's mind. So assuming we start with the beginner's mind, that's like huge place to start. Many people forget, go their whole lives not beginner's mind. So we start with the beginner's mind. Another part that is important is we're dealing with some part of ourselves that may be being judged by some other part of ourselves. We may be busy being all like having an inner critic voice, like I'm so bad at this, right? So it's very difficult to feel like, why can't I get any work done while I'm busy stuck with some part of me saying I'm so bad at this. Well, obviously it's a lot harder to work when I have some dude standing next to me saying you're so bad at this. And in that sense, a missing piece in my process might be that I haven't realized that there's in fact some dude standing here saying you're so bad at this, and I haven't told him to like, hey, can you leave me alone while I do my work, or whatever it is that I need to do. I'm blended with, it's in internal family systems, it's called blended, but some other part has actually taken over my process. And in that sense, I'm busy trying to be like, hey, why can't I get any work done? While every second sentence, there's some guy going, rah, 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 you're bad at this. And so that's a basic pitfall, that I need to separate myself from any other voices or any other parts of me that are hanging around and criticizing my process. So that's a second missing piece in the process. The third one is to have compassion. So compassion is like the greasing of the gears of the parts of the mind. So without compassion, here I am going like, I don't know, I've got this weird lazy part of me, like he just never wants to exercise. And because of that, that lazy part of me isn't going to be like, oh, let me explain my valuable reasons for resting. He's going to be like, I'm feeling kind of judged here. I'm not going to like open up. I'm not going to share because maybe I'll just get shut down. And so not having compassion is another like missing piece in the process that can really like block the process. And the last one I was going to mention is curiosity. So often parts of us aren't being approached with curiosity. Again, we've got that judgment one, we've got the blending one, we've got that inner critic voice. The interesting thing is, oh, hey, some part of me is trying to sit on the couch for some really damn good reason. Like it's trying to be lazy and not go for a run. And as much as I want it to not do that, if I approach it, this part of me with judgment and attack and endless like forcing, it's going to be a very much a journey with turmoil, trying to convince myself and harangue and twist my arm into doing a certain thing. Whereas if I approach with curiosity, that part of me will tend to be a bit more relaxed, be a bit more open and willing to share. Compassion and curiosity there's a whole list of qualities with which to approach the parts of us, but compassion and curiosity are a good start. And with that, I can get the parts of me to open up so that I can understand them better and maybe resolve their problems. Maybe the part of me that likes to lie on the couch is feeling like it's not getting enough rest when I sleep at night. And if I have that conversation, I can solve that problem. And then when I go for a run, I'll be like, yes, this just feels good. There isn't a resistance there anymore. Right. So these are the missing pieces that may be making any therapeutic process more difficult. But right. So from here, to get into the therapy. So usually at this point we pick something. It's called a trailhead. It's like, where do I start walking down the pathway into my crap, my problems, my whatever. And there's a few ways to start with this. One is, when have I acted in a way where I went, what was I thinking? Where I went, that was super weird. Why did I do that? Another one was, when have I acted in a way that I felt trapped or restricted or limited, or I just, I was in a social circumstance and I'd like to feel more free rather than compressed and contracted and whatever. So like the trailhead usually starts with either a memory or something that's happened recently, or can even start with, oh, right now I'd like to feel more creative. And so I'd like to get in touch with the parts of me that sort of manage creativity and prevent me from being creative in certain circumstances. Obviously, we all went through some sort of schooling system that taught us to be suppressed about our creativity. So we want to maybe re-examine that and invite the creativity to do what it likes, because believe it or not, we're not in primary school anymore, but some part of us might still think that we are. And in that sense, as we go to get in touch with it, it can open up and realize that, oh, it's a bit more free. But sometimes parts of the mind get sort of stuck in the past in terms of where they learned their tricks, where they learned their habits. So it's called the trailhead. I'd like to invite our participants to, if they want, they can come up with a trailhead and work with it as we go along, or you can just keep listening along. Chris, did you have a trailhead that you wanted to work on in particular?
Oh, I
can give you a
could.
minute to pull one up if you like, or
I could, but I'd be also happy if one of the others preferred, because like maybe someone who's less familiar with it might.
I've already worked with you once before, Chris. It's maybe this is an open offer if you want to work with some part of you that you're like, what's going on with that, and we'll see where we go. Otherwise, I can also dig up one of my own trailheads, which is trickier practice because.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I just wanted to give an opportunity. Omega?
I guess there's maybe two things that come to mind. The first is more of a recent thing. Sorry. I guess it's been on my mind recently, but it's probably been affecting me for a long time. And that's, I guess, that I think there's a part of me that really doesn't like deleting things or like throwing things away. And there's a part of me that wants to be more organized and be able to get stuff done. And so that creates some conflict.
Right. I mean, that's a perfect trailhead. It's a great place to start. So there's, like you've said, there's probably two parts there. There's the deleting one and there's the order one. The way to do this is to one at a time, because if you try and do all at once, they sort of confuse each other and piss each other off, and like it's better to just go one at a time. So if we go to talk to this part of you that's not good, I assume deleting things includes throwing things out, includes like hoarding, like minor hoarding, like as a hoarder. uh, I get what it's like to have too much stuff, but what we want to do now is we want to get in touch with this part of you that is in charge of these things. So the way to do that is there are 4 channels down which we look. The first is the visual channel. So if I think, what does this part of me look like? Now that may be represented by a person, it may be an animal, a tree, it may be a face, it may be any visual image, could be the color green, like could be really any, like what comes to my visual imagination when I think, what does this part look like? Obviously, humanoid is more common, but anything is possible. It could be an alien, it could be a ghost, it could be a dragon, like, you know, dragon holding its pile of gold, who knows? But yeah, so first channel is, do you have a visual representation of this part? So, yeah.
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is like a person like clutching like an armful of goods to their chest.
Right. Great. Perfect. So that's kind of what they look like. They're clutching a bunch of stuff. So that's your basic signal down the visual channel. And shortly, in a little bit in the process, we'll be watching that like visual to see if it changes, to see if it comes up with, you know, if it decides to let things go, if it changes its behavior. But for now, we don't need to change it. We don't need to judge it. That's just what it kind of looks like. So the second channel we're going to look down is the auditory channel. So is this part of you like saying something? Now, it doesn't have to be your visual image actually talking to you. It can just be like a voice, like a voice in your head. It can be like, it doesn't have to be a voice. It can be like a sound, like it can be like hush or some other auditory type imagination that comes through that represents this part of you. And it's also possible that any of these channels could just not have anything on. They don't really sound like anything, but maybe it does. So do you have like a sound?
Nothing comes to mind so far.
Okay. I mean, it could be like a voice saying like, we have to keep everything, or what if we lose it, or like something like that as well. But if nothing's coming, then like we can leave it open. Maybe later we'll check if it's saying something. But for now, it's a person clutching things, but it doesn't really have an audio. So the third channel is the emotion. So does this part have a particular emotion associated with it? Now that could be happy, sad, miserable. It could be any of the range of emotions.
Maybe fear or
Right.
I guess particularly fear of regret, but just
Right.
in general sort of fear.
So fear of regret. Great. So that's the third channel. The fourth channel is there a location in the body that like, or a sensation in the body that particularly, it's not really an emotion anymore. It's just the part seems to be located, you know, next to my heart or something, or down my back, or, you know, it could be anything like that.
I guess I noticed a tenseness in my stomach or chest, but I guess I associate that with more like the feeling of anxiety or fear, and I'm not sure whether it's specific to this part of me as such.
Right. Well, that's, I mean, you did say fear or regret, so it could be related, it could be something different, but in general, we're going to keep an eye on that as well and see if it moves or does anything as we sort of start to talk to this part or work with this part. So we've got it's a person clutching things, it feels a bit of fear and regret, and you've got this stomach sense or location around your stomach that maybe, so this is like, now we're sort of in touch with the part. We've built, like, started to build a picture of what this part is or what it's doing. So the first step that we want to do now that we've got in touch with the part is we want to just double check that we're not like severely judging this part. So we want to check, like, how do we feel about this part? Do I feel like extra judgy towards it? Or am I like kind of curious? And if I am feeling extra judgy, can I like shift out of those things and get to the place that is? So the qualities are curious, compassionate, patient, present, calm, just generally on the good side of things. Because we don't actually know why this part is hoarding things yet. Or we may have a hunch from the past, but we haven't asked it yet. We want to be curious towards it. So just to check, how do you feel about this part?
I don't know, maybe frustrated.
Right. Okay. Now, naturally, we do have a problem with this part. So obviously, we're going to feel things at times towards this part of you. So what we want to do is we want to get that frustration. We want to ask it if it can put that on pause for a bit. You know, for the next process, we need to be able to talk to this part without the frustration here. Otherwise, you know, if you've ever been frustrated at someone and tried to get them to do what you told them to, you go, why won't you do what you tell me? It doesn't really work as well as if I can keep my frustration back and have a clear conversation. So to check, can you ask your frustration if it will just step back for a bit of the process, or does it say no, it doesn't? You can't really relieve the frustration. And if the answer is no, then that's also important information. We can't really force parts to do anything, which is a huge and important part of this process. What we'll end up doing is, instead of working with your part that wants to hold on to things, we'll start talking to this frustrated part and seeing if we can, like maybe the part that's holding on to things is being agitated by the frustrated part. And in that sense, if we alleviate the agitation, then we go towards the clutching, then it may be easier to resolve the whole situation.
I think I can put the frustration on pause. I guess I'm not certain, but I think so.
Okay. I mean, at any time in the process, the frustration may come back, and if you notice it, we can always pause the process and address the frustration. Obviously, some part of you is frustrated. That's what this model would say. Some part of you is frustrated. As we move towards working with your clutching, we may further frustrate your frustrated part, because we're actually getting closer to the thing that is clutching and like in fear. And in that sense, we may irritate your frustration enough that it will be like, that's it, we have to like block this process. This isn't good. We're doing the bad thing, obviously. So we may have to address it further in the process. But for now, if you can get that to step back, then we can go towards the part of you that is clutching and fear and regret and in your stomach. So right, how do we go towards it? So one thing we can do is we can ask this part, what does it do? What is its job? Because right now I can guess, but we should ask it, like, what do you do? And what we're watching for is down any of the channels. Does it change? It's visual, it's auditory, it's emotional, or its location in the body that gives you a sense, oh, it does this. And you may also just have a knowing sense, oh, this part, its job is to hoard things or something, or its job is to hold on to things. I should be careful with my language because I don't want to like, it's interesting. So the word hoarding, right? It has sort of like a negative connotation. So when I say, oh, this part's job is to hoard things, I've almost insulted this part of you. And I'm like, oh, I have to speak to that. Otherwise I'm being rude. I don't want to be rude. So again, rolling back a step, what is this part's job?
I think like to keep things safe and keep
right.
I don't know, preserve memories and yeah, I guess preserve my past and history and that kind of thing.
Nice. Well, that's great. I love that. that's a really good reason for a part to be doing a thing, right? And in that sense, the next step in the process is to thank this part for it's clearly putting in a bunch of effort to like clutch and hold on to things. So in this moment, we get to go like, oh, thank you. We get to offer some appreciation towards this part of us that is doing this preserving of memories, right? So feel free to internally just offer some appreciation to this part of you that is doing this possibly thankless task of preserving everything. And yeah, how does that feel to offer some gratitude or appreciation towards this part?
Yeah, I think it feels good.
Cool. So the next question that we kind of want to ask the part is, and we may already have a clue of this, is what is it worried would happen if it didn't do its job of, it's just said its job is safe, to keep safe and preserve memories. What is it worried would happen if it didn't do that job?
I guess that things would be lost and I'd be I guess losing part of who I am if I don't have my memories anymore.
Right. Right. Fair enough. I mean, that's a pretty important job. So my guess is that this part of you that is clutching and preserving memories is a protector part. Its job is to take actions to protect you, to keep you from feeling safe and lost and like losing parts of yourself. And in that sense, it is likely set up to protect some smaller, younger, earlier part of you whose job is who is feeling like you have lost some of you or like worried for the loss. And in that sense, we can't really, we can ask the part of you that is clutching things to just let go of things, but it really doesn't want to. It thinks it's doing the right thing by preserving all your memories. What we actually need to do is go talk to that other part of you and double check if we can resolve some of that feeling of lost and feeling like you're losing part of you in order that this protector can relax its job. So in order to do that, we need to check with this protector if we can go and approach the part of you that feels kind of lost or like it's losing part of itself. So can you ask this safe memory preserver if we can go in and talk to this other part of you that is feeling like it's losing parts of itself? And it may say yes, it may say no.
I think so. I guess I'm finding it a little hard to visualize, but
Well, we can continue, and then what may happen is we may completely get lost and get blocked, and then we may have to backtrack a little bit and reconnect with this part. But for now, it seems like we're willing to go forwards. So now we're going to look at this part of you that feels like it's losing part of itself. So again, we're going to go for the 4 channels. So do you have a visual representation of the thing that you described? I know I keep using a label that I picked, but do you have a visual representation for what you describe as part of you losing itself or getting lost?
I guess maybe something like a sieve or a drain where like things are falling through.
Right, perfect. So it doesn't have to be a human. You're absolutely right. A sieve or a drain. That is absolutely perfect for a part. So that's sort of what it looks like. Next question is it saying anything, or what does it sound like something?
I don't know, maybe like like the sound of someone yelling no as they fall down a well.
Right. That's perfect. That's exactly like, that's just what it sounds like. It's like, no. Right. Um, and I mean, this is the thing about parts. They sort of appear however they want to appear. You know, I was saying earlier, it's not clear if we discover existing parts or we sort of generate them on the spot as we try and dig into things. But you have a part that's saying no as it falls down. So the third channel now is the emotion. How does it, is there a particular emotion associated with this part?
I think like sadness.
Right. So sadness. That's okay. And the last question is the body. Is there a particular location in the body or a particular sensation that you associate with this part? And there may not be again.
I guess not particularly. I guess there's still the feeling of anxiety, but I think not sure that that's related to the. Well, yeah. Anyway,
That's fine. Keep an eye on it. It may be related. It may not be. So we've sort of now got in touch with this part. That is some inner part of you that is like a sieve drain, screaming no as it falls down, and it's kind of a bit sad. So the first thing we might want to do is we might want to be like, hello, because often these parts don't recognize that we're in the middle of a therapeutic process. They're just sort of doing their own thing, feeling sad. So feel free to like say hello to this part and just see if it changes or if it, you know, if it says something back, or, you know, maybe it's a bit too busy being sad, or maybe it knows that we're here but doesn't really know what to do about it.
I think so before we continue, I think I just want to check in with Julian, because I feel like I'm taking like a lot of the attention from the session. I want to check that.
Yeah, no worries. Again, I'm pretty ignorant on this stuff, but I think I'm getting a good grasp of the sort of way that this therapy might work. And so thank you very much for like volunteering to help out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's like
I just wanted to check that.
Very vulnerable.
Like, yeah, if you want to spend more time on you or something, Julian, I just don't want to take up all the time or things like that if you've got things that you want to talk about.
Again, I'm pretty easy and flexible, so maybe in the technical things, which is not really a personal thing, but like when we're talking about the auditory, is that more about the information, about understanding clearly what this part is all about, more so than the sound?
Right. So so far we had two parts. So one of them didn't really say much, and then the second one was saying like no. There's a variety of things that can come down that auditory channel. Sometimes they're voices, like it may be the voice of my father telling me off or something. Sometimes it can just be words, and sometimes it may be like the sound of an ambulance siren. Like it can be a whole variety of things. Really depends on the person as to how that information comes. Obviously, we're talking to this part and we got the answer. The previous part was concerned with preserving memories. Somehow that information came to Omega here. And so chances are it sort of came up as words or as a voice or as through the auditory channel a little bit, but ultimately later on when people get a bit more practiced at this, I wouldn't even bother going down all the channels. I'd say, tell me about what this part that we're going to get in touch with. And whichever details of the part are more relevant will sort of pop to the surface. And obviously the empty channels just sort of stay empty. But in the beginning, I'm like, oh, better go down all the channels just in case there's something there that we're not paying attention to or some useful information. But later down the track, all the information, people can sort of, they know what the part looks like and sounds like without having to like explain it to the therapeutic person. Cool. So we're getting in touch with this part of you that is, again, it's a bit like a sieve in a drain. I'm repeating this just in case it's getting a bit foggy, or like that slide tour took us too far away. Sieve with drain, it's screaming like no, it's a little bit sad, and it might be this anxiety feeling in the body too. So one thing we can ask this part is how old is it? And there's a few questions here. How old is it, and how old does it think you are? And sometimes it can be very surprising just how young these parts are. But let's see if it has an answer. Does it, if you ask it, how old are you? Or how old is it? What does it say?
I guess the first number that comes to my head is like 6, but I'm not sure whether that is like prompted by what you were saying earlier about like a protective part, like sheltering a child kind of idea.
Yep. It's sort of hard to know whether 6 is really 6 or, you know, around that age anyway. But let's take it as it is. So let's assume this part of you is in fact 6 years old. It may or may not be, but for the purpose of continuing, like maybe it is. So one thing that we can do with the fact that it seems to think that it's 6 is we can, there's a process called updating. So I don't think you're actually 6. I think you're a whole bunch older than 6, but this part of you seems to think that you're 6. So you're welcome to tell this part, hey, do you realize we're not 6 anymore? And occasionally this can be kind of surprising to some part of you. You may feel like an internal emotional shift, go like, oh, really? You may need to, you can do things like tell the part how old you are. You can show the part like some memories of you growing up. And this can be very surprising to just realize that you're a whole bunch older than it was when it, you know, decided that it had to hold on to this sadness for you. So for some people and for some processes, just knowing that I'm a bunch older completely makes the thing disappear. But for others, the sadness is still there. You know, you may have stumbled on the sadness of losing memories, which is more like an eternal timeless human problem than it is a 6-year-old problem. So you may not, like, just as an adult think you have solved that. And so there's still a part of you that might feel sad about that. It may not be, it may not be done just because we said, hey, look, we're older than that.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess as I'm thinking about it a bit more, I guess I feel like I'm 30, but I'm losing like memories over like I don't know, my whole life is there's memories being lost from like lots of years of my life. So I don't know, the sieve, I'm not sure that my sieve has an age because it's losing memories from everywhere.
Right. Yep. I mean, perfectly valid. Like that seems like probably what some part of you is feeling. And again, I don't know if we, the one model of we generate the parts that describe what's going on for us, or, you know, you picked up a sieve when you were 6 and you're like, oh, this is a great metaphor for the rest of my internal working of my mind. It doesn't really matter. There's still a part of you that's like a bit sad about this. So our job now as the more adult version is to come in with some compassion and some understanding. And to that extent, I'd say, is there something that you can say to this part of you to offer some reassurance or some understanding? I mean, those are two separate things. So understanding first. Do you understand where it's coming from? Like, this part of you seems to be keeping track of the loss of memories, and it's a bit sad about it. Do you understand where it's coming from?
Yeah, I think so.
Right. And then can you offer it some reassurance as a, you know, generally the more of your being that you have access to, can you offer it some reassurance? Be like, hey, I don't know, what sort of reassurance would you like to offer?
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is like losing memories happens to everyone, but it also, that doesn't feel very reassuring to me. Like just because other people have the problem doesn't make me feel like it's less of a problem.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
hmm,
So you can say that to the pod and see what it says as well. And it
hmm.
may just come back with that as the problem.
Yeah, I think yeah, maybe the feeling that comes back is like, just because other people have the same problem doesn't make my problem less valid or
Right.
something like that.
Right. Well, good point. It doesn't. But my sense is there's like this sadness here that what we want to do is we want to sort of just hang out with the sadness for a bit. A lot of this modern world is about we're very well trained to run away from our emotions and to make them go away and do all sorts of things. So, but like, let's just hang out with a little bit of sadness for a moment, and the sadness of like losing memories, and just see if it. Obviously, the first thing that happens when we hang out with memory with emotions is they get a little worse before they do anything else. So if we hang out with it a little bit. And just see what happens next. And again, we're not really expecting any particular outcome here. We're just hanging out with the sadness. Often, emotions haven't quite been properly acknowledged. And so when we hang out with it, we can do something of an acknowledgement that helps put them to peace a bit, or helps them to settle in a way that we were too busy running from them because emotions bad. Everyone does emotions bad.
Yeah, I guess there's maybe a simultaneous like sense of sadness and like a sense of calm.
Yep. Great. Perfect. We're gonna keep waiting a little longer, see where we end up. We might end up with less sadness and more calm. It's this fascinating waiting time, but super crucial. Super crucial. Like I'm like, oh, I should fill the space with words. Oh no, I shouldn't do that. I should just fill the space with space. Right. So we can check back in with this part. We check out how's it feeling now?
I think still sad, and I guess maybe there's some grief over like memories where like I have the general concept of like a time in my life and can't remember the specifics, and so it's like there's a bit of yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm also present to like slightly elevated heart rate, like in my chest, which I would usually put towards like fear. Like there's a fear of having lost something. Oh yeah, that's here as well. And I want to name it because otherwise I'm just kind of like pretending it's not here. And it's kind of more important to name these things and be present to them. Right. So sadness is now a bit of grief. Like, yeah, it is sad that and there's this thing happens. It's like a human universal that memories do fade. Uh, from the adult perspective, we also have we can offer some reassurance that old memories are replaced by new experiences. And we can invite this possibility of what's new to come in. We can say to this part, hey, look, there's all of this new stuff that may not necessarily replace the old memories, but bring us new stuff. we can see if this part likes that as a piece of information, or if it wants to like keep staying in sadness and grief a little longer, because both of those are perfectly valid.
Yeah, I think the feels like reassuring or hopeful that there's like more like positive experiences to add to the memory bank, like still to come kind of thing, and like it's not all dwindling, like there's like fresh things.
Right, great. So the next thing we can do with this part is we can invite it to like, instead of, so in the past it's been pretty busy hanging out with the sadness and watching memories disappear. We can now invite it to look forward to new experience and like, you know, offer it to this is a kind of a tricky thing. We can ask this part if it would like to take on a different job of, instead of looking after the old memories, to like invite new ones, or to be searching for great new opportunities in our future. Maybe it says yes, maybe it says no, like sort of up to the part at this point. I mean, overall, if the part is feeling better, we've already done well in this process.
I think it's feeling like it doesn't want to let go of the past ones, but it's glad to have
Okay.
new memories coming in.
Great. Well, this is already great. So what you can do over the next couple of weeks, maybe once a week, maybe every day, as much as you like, you can sort of check in with this part of you and be all like, are we making enough new memories? Do we need to do something different? How are things going? This is up to you if you want to check in with this part of you. But we can ask this part, is there anything else that it wants or that we can do for it?
I think maybe there's a sense of like maybe the more meaningful and exciting the present is, then the less I need to live in the past.
That sounds great. Cool. I hope you got I hope you got the message from that like, oh, I need to make my present meaningful and exciting.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, so we can let this part just go back to what it has been doing, or you know, its new role. And I want to check back in with the part that we, the protector part, the thing that was preserving memories. So you said that it looked like it was clutching some objects. There was a feeling of fear and regret, and there was a sensation in the stomach that you said, and you said that those were the I call them, they're called handles, the things that we can use to grab onto the part and get to it. So that was the part that was preserving memories. So we want to ask the part, first of all, this funny thing happens where they're not always watching. So check with the part and check if it saw what happened to this, what we did with this smaller part of you that was feeling lost. And hopefully it says yes.
I guess I'm not sure.
Okay. So the next thing I would want to ask this part of you is, so its job has been to keep safe and preserve the memories. Does it still feel like it needs to do that, or does it need to do it as ferociously as it has been doing in the past? And it may be yes, and it may be no. Like if it's yes, that's also fine. You know, maybe there's another reason why it's been doing that we haven't checked in with. Um, hmm.
I think it's feeling protective, maybe that it doesn't trust that I'll
Yep.
create new memories or create valuable experiences. And so until it has like proof of like worthwhile things coming in, then it doesn't want to um like it doesn't want to give up things right now on a promise of future things. It wants to have proof first before it will let go.
Well, that's fair enough. That seems very reasonable. It also does sound like that when new stuff comes in, the old stuff will easily be let go. Um, so, I mean, is there, we can ask this part, is there anything else that it wants you to do? Obviously, it wants you to make new memories before it's ready to drop the old ones, but is there anything else that it wants you to do?
I think it's also sort of in charge of like record keeping, and so like it wants to make sure that if I need some information in the future, that like it's searchable and accessible to me, or like that kind of thing.
Well,
Or if I
that's
have like part of a memory that comes up in the future and I want to find that conversation or that photo, that I can do that.
right. That seems great. That's like super important. Has a really important role there. So, I mean, I wouldn't be telling it to do anything else, but I do want to check. The reason that we started this trailhead in the first place is that you were feeling cluttered or feeling like you had difficulty deleting things. Right? So it sounds like we're sort of in a mind of like, let's not delete things. But is that still an okay answer, or do we still have a problem? We still need to delete things, like, because if we're not done, we need to find a way to negotiate this stuff.
Yeah, I think that maybe the part of me that wants like order and I don't know, simplicity and that kind of thing doesn't want like a clutter of files that like are meaningless.
Right.
But the protective part is like worried about like how to decide which things are meaningless and sort of, I don't know, just goes overboard and decides to just protect everything
Keep it all.
as default.
Right. So I mean, there's this problem. There's this part of you that wants order and simplicity, and so what we can do is we can go back to this part of you that's holding on to all of these memories, and we're like, hey, this other part of me wants order and simplicity. Obviously, we want to preserve your interests as well in preserving memories. Is there a way we can do that while staying ordered? And let's just see what the part says.
You know, I guess maybe asking it like, is this thing connected to a valuable memory or not?
Great. So to check with the part of you that really wants order and simplicity, is that going to work for it too?
I think it's worried that there's too many items, and so it's gonna searching through one by one is gonna be too slow, or something like that.
Right, fair enough. So on this side, we can talk to the part of you that wants order and simplicity, and just double check if there's something else that it's bothered by. Like we've sort of taken it as a given that we should dig into the part of you that is preserving memories, and we haven't dug into the part of you that really wants order. But we can equally do the same thing on this side, that we can, check on the 4 channels and ask it, what is it worried would happen if it didn't do its job, and see if we can get some movement on that side as well. But before we do that, I figured now's probably a good time that we've gone down one rabbit hole and then back up. Now's a good time to pause the process and just check in with everyone else and see if there's any questions. And that's generally how an IFS session might go. We'd pick up a part, we would ask it a couple of simple questions, and then check how we feel about it, and then come back up for air. And of course, it's up to you to check in with these parts in the future, or possibly renegotiate the relationship between these parts. Obviously, there's still something here. You have the part of you that doesn't want to delete things and the part of you that wants order and simplicity, and that's unresolved. But you do have the possibility of continuing this conversation with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how it would be.
Thank you so much, Elliot.
Yeah, you're welcome. I want to check with Julian if there's any questions as well.
Two questions. So first, the big one is how do we actually monitor and try and affect behavioral change? Like I'm assuming we're using a lot of these, like the channels and the like, to monitor changes, but over sort of what time frame are we trying to then change behavior in the real world? And do you encourage people to try and actually start making plans in this sort of therapy type approach, or sort of change your sort of subconscious and the like, and have that as a discrete, separate process? That's the first sort of big question.
Do you want me to answer that, or do you want to ask? I can answer that, or I can talk about that a bit. So this is a this is a very, very tricky question, because it's sort of the question of how do we know if the therapy worked, and that's just hard across all therapies. The general so internal family system stuff will work on a huge variety of issues, like, for example, suicidal tendencies, alcoholism, bulimia, like all sorts of things can be approached through the lens of internal family systems, really. And in those big and like more high pressure situations, we really want to see the outcomes in the real world. We want to see the person being less alcoholic. We want to see the outcomes really quickly. Now, the model is that the parts do the things in the world. And so if we have, in fact, talked to all of the parts, and sometimes there's like an extra part that we didn't get to this week, that sort of thing. But if we have talked to all of the parts, then basically instantly we can expect that I'm not going to want to do that behavior anymore. And the first way to do it is to, hopefully, if our client is honest, we can be like, hey, do you still want to drink? And the person may be like, yes. And then in which case we need to, like, if we want to stop the drinking behavior, we need to go down that path and resolve it. If the person says, no, I feel great, I feel like I don't need to drink, what may still happen over the course of the week is they may encounter a threat or something that stresses them out, which makes them go, wow, I need my coping mechanism. I need to start drinking to avoid this stressful thing in my life. In which point, the next week we may come back to therapy and address the fact that there was something more to do and more work to do. Generally, so we can ask Omega here, like, does he feel like he's hoarding less, or does he feel like does he feel a bit more free down on the topic of holding on to memories, or not? And that'll give us a clue as to whether he feels like we made a difference. So we can do that now. Like, hey, Omega, do you feel like a bit more free about stuff, or like you've resolved some of the thing here, or do you feel exactly where we were when we started, or similar?
I think I feel like hopeful but reserved. If that makes sense. Like I feel like
Fair enough. That seems very reasonable. The other thing I want to point out is, like, this is a session with someone watching. In a private scenario, maybe we could approach those emotional things a bit more closely and maybe express them a bit without having to feel like, oh, I got to sort of manage it internally while not expressing it. Particularly, like, we're talking about like sadness, like society has taught us not to display our sadness. And if that's the thing that needed some resolving, maybe it's a little tricky to do it in the circumstance that we're in now. But it may have gotten deeper if we were more private. But or like felt more free to just hang out with the sadness. And I mean, maybe you would cry a bit. I don't know. Depends on the person and how freely they feel like they're safe to access negative emotional experiences. So does that answer the question of how do we know if we've actually affected change over time?
That's helpful. And again, I haven't actually learned about it, but I've heard some of my psych lecturers talking about motivational interviewing being like one of their favorite new things, which sounds like it might have some similarities to the sort of process you just went through. So I don't know if you know about that. I don't yet, but apparently it's really good.
I'm interested.
Motivational interviewing. And yeah, another big potential question, is this IFS usually done with a therapist? Because I noticed you were very careful not to prompt the subject at all, but we were lucky that the subject, that Omega, was extremely insightful and creative and intelligent. So is that part of the IFS model usually, as opposed to potentially prompting people for, do you feel sad? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel this or that? And then see if that helps them identify that particular aspect of that part, for example.
Right. So I have in my head a heuristic of which emotions tend to connect to which emotions. So I'm used to, I actually can be like, hey, that seems a bit like, and I did a little bit that, like, sadness turning to, like, I pointed out a bit of fear there next to the sadness and grief. So as I have gotten practice in the model, I can do that, but it's kind of important not to lead a person into certain things, because you just won't get the right outcomes. If you're like, oh, sadness, that means this, bam.
Yep.
Like, that's might have been what someone else did, but won't be what this person is doing. And so it's kind of super important to let them self-guide. Now, I'd say that, yes, you can do this work on your own, but it's a bit tricky. Remember earlier I was mentioning I called them the missing pieces in the process. So like, I've done this process and I've just gotten stuck. I've gotten to a point where I'll ask a question and not get anything, and ask the question, not get anything, and be like, okay, now what do I do? And like, the piece I was missing is I wasn't offering enough appreciation to the part. So I sort of needed to, like, pause the process, go away, think about it, and come back. Or I needed someone external to be like, hey, you should offer some more appreciation to this part, to help unhook me from where I was stuck. So it is possible to do it on your own. I can now do it on my own, but it took me working with people who knew what they were doing and knew how the method sort of carries out in order to get the hang of the regular pitfalls. And obviously, it's the regular pitfalls for me where, oh, I could offer myself a bit more compassion. Oh, I need to be more curious. Like, and then I got into the habit of doing those things, and the method got easier, and I can do it on my own. So it is doable on your own. There's a book by Jay Early called Self Therapy, and that sort of outlines this method in a bit more detail. But again, it's difficult if you've never had, like, someone holding the container and being like, now turn left, now turn right. but again, I mean, I read the book before and tried it myself, and then I worked with some people. I was like, oh, I was missing all of this stuff, and then I got even better at it. So I would always say, like, hey, try it a bit on your own. You really can't screw yourself up because your system will just shut down. Like you'll be like, I don't want to think about that.
And I'm sorry, this is personal, but did you do like clinical psychology stuff? Because have they used any of this sort of approach?
Is the question
Like in like psychology training in therapy, do they use similar approaches of like creating the different parts to analyze some your own internal issues?
Yeah, so internal family systems is a recognized school of psychotherapy. It's more in the therapeutic, the psychotherapy, that it is in the psychology, but there's thousands of trained therapists in internal family systems. They're like, there's this funny thing that happens in psychology that like the big flashy issues, like I named bulimia, alcoholism, they're issues in which results are super clear. And so they're the ones that get studied. Like, can we use this model to solve someone's bulimia? And the answer is basically yes. But then everyone else who doesn't have alcoholism but has their own like want to hold on to memories, sort of like not as drastic in externally observable, but still like internally very frustrating. And the model also works on these like personal problems. But in answer to your question, yes, it's a recognized method.
And something else that my social work counselors are very interested in is another therapy called accelerated resolution therapy, which they mostly use for post-traumatic stress disorder and other behavioral changes. So it looks really weird to me of like doing weird stuff with like blinking and closing your eyes. But apparently, according to my clinical friends, it's really effective, but I don't know if it's actually available in Australia. It seems like a pretty new thing.
Yeah.
But that's, again, something else to potentially look into. Unfortunately, a lot of these things you probably have to pay to get training from people in the field. But if you can just read about it, maybe you can reverse engineer and maybe see if you can safely implement some of these things for your own, use for yourself and maybe with any clients.
Yeah, from a parts perspective on what you just described of accelerated resolution therapy, what we end up with is sort of segregated bits of the mind. Like there's in this case, it was the part that wants to preserve memories, and then there's another part that wants to be more ordered. And those two parts are not very good at talking to each other because they have a disagreement, and they don't treat each other nice, and so they can't communicate and they can't resolve. In things like PTSD, there's often an experience that has a memory that then shuts something down. And so there's the rest of the human trying to function with this like bunch of the mind that is shut down. So what these, from a parts perspective, what this method may do is try and get those parts to be present enough and then like start build connections between that part and the rest of the mind. And obviously what we've done here was a very slow conversation. We just sort of ambled our way to like different parts. And we live in this world where we're like, okay, how do we make it economically affordable? How do we hurry up and get to the resolution as soon as we can? And how do we actually solve everyone's PTSD as soon as we can? Because PTSD is not fun. And so there's a constant push of how do we get a method to work faster than the slow method?
Yeah, so the accelerated thing is really fast.
Yeah.
Crazy fast.
I'm interested in how it works. The cool thing about this method in the way that it is slow is that for Amigi here, he now knows everything that I've done. I was like laying it out as I was doing it. And so if he goes away, he can kind of repeat all of those steps. Whereas something like accelerated resolution therapy, the client may not get how to solve it. So they may finish that bit of PTSD, but if it ever happens again, they won't know what to do about it. They won't be able to repeat the accelerated resolution process on their own. So it depends on if we want to just get rid of the PTSD, fix it and get rid of it, or really teach the tools more globally to the whole system so that it can work with itself, so that it can sort itself out. And they're different processes. I'd say some people really, really, really need to get rid of their depression or PTSD. And then once they've done that, they can look at deeper therapies that then improve the, there's this thing where we're sort of taught that we're kids and then we're teenagers and then we're adults and then once we get somewhere in our 20s, we're just adults now. But as we all know, we sort of keep growing, and some of these therapy tools start looking like, oh, this is what growing up looks like once you're an adult and you continue to grow up. So accelerated resolution therapy sounds something more like it'll fix it, but it won't help you grow up. Whereas I would look at internal family systems as helping you to continue to grow up.
That makes sense.
Which is like, there's totally a place in the world for accelerated resolution therapy, or something that works really quick and just fixes the problem. But also, I want to be able to have the tools for myself, and that I can. It's not like once I have internal family systems, I work externally, like with my friends, resolving their problems by being compassionate and understanding and curious about what's going on for them. And suddenly, all of my life is better internally and externally because I have those tools. Whereas I don't know anything. I don't know enough about accelerated resolution therapy to really make those comments. But if someone, like if I were to run around using some accelerated process on all my friends, they'd probably start getting really pissed off. If I was like, here, change yourself like this, sure. Like, yeah. But if this more like soft and gentle method seems to like it feels like a deeper underlying change of self leadership and like getting the like greasing the gears of my mind. Yeah. Thanks for all the questions. Yeah.
If I could throw in there as well, I went through my NLP training. We did stuff around working with parts, and we did some stuff around eye movement and blinking as part of rapid change processes. So these things are not like, they're not unique or completely like this new completely out there idea. These are things that people are familiar with, but it's likely that it's been honed in a particular way. So I like the internal family systems approach because it's much more systematic and fleshed out than the versions that I've used in NLP, and it's something that creates more of a sense of like you were saying, that someone develops those relationships themselves between the parts of themselves, and that's an important part of growing up. And likewise with the eye movement and all of that, it might be that this is a much more honed kind of version of it. So yeah.
And a lot of this is probably also just information and marketing, that people are not aware of certain approaches, and then they find the product. It's like, oh, this is amazing. I've never seen this before.
Yeah, and also one of the challenges with NLP, like a lot of people are going to be skeptical of something because it's associated with NLP, and there's some justification for that. NLP has as a sort of a movement, a philosophy. It doesn't have a clear sort of canonical, this is true NLP so much, and the people who use the term NLP often have a very low bar for what's good enough evidence. So yeah, it's natural there's going to be some skepticism, and
because
that's
again,
okay.
I haven't studied it, but I get the impression that it's more in the low evidence-based woo type field, more alternative medicine than regular therapy, from my like general knowledge.
Yeah, but look, if you find something that works, I have my own perspective on NLP, which maybe we can talk about in another workshop. But I try not to treat it as one thing, that it's actually made up of many different things, and some of those are well supported by evidence. Some are really magical thinking and not in a necessarily a helpful way. Some of them are like, well, if it helps you to shift your beliefs in that way, then that might actually be what you need. So anyway, it's complicated.
There's also something really interesting where when a new modality comes out, it like scores very highly. And then as it gets tested further and further, there's like a regression to the mean where it doesn't score nearly as highly. And I wonder about what causes some of those effects. And I suspect that sometimes it's the client believing in the method, and sometimes it's the practitioner believing in the method. And then obviously the therapeutic relationship helps to improve the chances of the method having progress on the problem. So in that sense, that we keep coming out with new methods is great.
And also, I think quite often some of those methods, they just don't have long-term effects. So you have to keep repeating them.
Yeah. Yeah. Although some of them, they work, and then those people don't need therapy anymore, and they don't talk about it anymore. And so we
Yep.
don't really have stats on them. Whereas the ones that therapy doesn't work on, they keep coming back to therapy. Different processes, different people, different journeys. But yeah, thanks for coming. I'm aware of the time that it's close to the hour now. But yeah, I figured I should check with Omega. How are you doing over there?
Yeah, I'm good. I was yeah, I'm very appreciative of you spending that time, and yeah, it's very kind of you to like host this workshop for us. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to do. I mean, it's effectively you just had an hour of therapy or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for therapy in the future, there's obviously a variety of methods and a variety of practitioners. If you like this method, I'd say go for it. If you didn't, then I'd be like, there are other ones out there that work quite differently. Yeah.
I was wondering, what's your history with like IFS as a client and as a practitioner?
Right. So I at first taught myself IFS and was like, this ain't very much use. And then I went, Jay Early, the one who wrote that book, and I did a course with him. And then I was like, well, actually, it was a friend of mine did the course with him and was like, this stuff is really good. And I was skeptical. And then I did the course myself, and I was like, oh, I clearly didn't get. So there's a concept in internal family systems of, and they call it the self, which is more that the like centered, curious, compassionate, that perspective with which to view the rest of your system. And the people who have done this therapy for a long time, they just have this quality to them where they are very calm, they are very centered, they know exactly what they're doing, they're not easily flustered, they have those great qualities to them. And for me, when I met the guy who wrote this book, and I did some work with him, and I was like, oh, he has not just the skill, but he has himself the living system of having developed these qualities quite deeply. And I'm super impressed with that. And once I saw that, I was like, oh, that's the thing. Like, I had to go meet the guy in order to understand that's the thing that makes this therapy quite so effective. That like calm centered perspective on all of the angles in which other parts will come up and sort of try and harangue the process at times or try and resist change. And so I met him and I did the work with him, and that like suddenly I was like, oh, this method is way better than I realized. And then I did a whole bunch of work with a bunch of my friends, and then I started working professionally, getting paid to work with the internal family systems model.
How long have you been doing it professionally?
Getting close to a year now, but there was like years before that of I was that annoying friend that likes to therapy all their other friends for like years. I don't know how people put up with me, but what I ended up finding was other people who wanted to therapy me back. And then, now I do it professionally as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's something like a couple of years under my belt. But ultimately, it's not like 20 years. Like the Jay Early has been doing this for 40 years, and I've got like 2 or 3. Yeah.
Wondering, what was the motivation to run this workshop?
So Chris has been wanting to run a bunch of different workshops on topics around procrastination, because that's his business. He works through people's procrastination, and I have the internal family systems model, and I figured I like working with people. I like running workshops. I get a lot. I mean, everyone. This version of the part of you that was clutching and preserving memories, and then a smaller sad thing. It's like one pathway in which brains work like this, and I've worked with so many people now that I'm like, oh, this is the contours of the mind of like humanity. Like for me, the more I work with people, the deeper my understanding of the variety of people and how they meet together. So yeah, I just love working with people.
And I consider that this is just it's a win-win. It's something which enables us to work with different people that we might not normally work with, and get to see how these processes land with people. It's an opportunity to give some value to people who actually need this, who need some healing, who need some support, and are possibly not at the stage of signing up to coaching or aren't able to for some reason. And it's also a way for us to show what we do. So Elliot has been showing his understanding of IFS and the practice of IFS here, and it gives you a bit of a glimpse into what working with Elliot would be like. And likewise, by running these events and running my own, like I've got an event on Friday, which is a bit outside of the center of my work. It's actually it's called Charisma for the Uncharismatic. And but it's always a popular, fun workshop. And so I'm running that on Friday. And by doing these things, we give people more of an introduction about what it's like to work with us. And I prefer marketing that way to doing like the hard sell, make big promises, but just annoy people kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. It feels good to give, like, here's an hour and a half of my time, free therapy, whatever. It feels good to do that than to be like, sign up now and you'll get extra bonuses, crap like that. When really, my merit is my ability to do the thing. So I really just want to show that off as much as I can.
Again, I think it would be very useful to actual practitioners in related fields who just wanted to see an example of the method being tried out.
Yeah. So, which is a good. Now's probably a good time to check. Are you okay if I put this up on YouTube? Noting that we have a photo of Julian, but no face for Amiga. Is it all right if I check this up on YouTube?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. What I might do is I'll still wait a couple of days, and if there's any reason you're like, oh, I don't want the whole world knowing any part of that, I'm happy to like cut out bits. I'm happy to not put it up at all. Feel free to let me know, and then I won't upload it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much, Elliot, and thanks, Amiga, for great participation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the
Yeah,
vulnerability thing. I was about to throw Chris on the podium of being vulnerable, but Omega came along and took the podium for him.
And I'll just mention that I was working through my own trailhead and following the process at the same time, and found that very valuable. So I've got more. So the next thing for me is doing some like hanging out with that part and acknowledging, and just sitting with that.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you all for coming. I might stop the recording here.